Holden. A name once shouted across drag strips, printed proudly on car badges, and whispered in pub arguments like gospel. For decades, it was the heart and soul of the Australian road, the working man's badge of honour. But today, it's gone. Dead. Buried. Replaced by rebadged SUVs from who knows where. How the bloody hell did we get here? Let's pop the bonnet on one of Australia's most iconic brands, from its humble beginnings to political sabotage, corporate betrayal, and the slow, painful death of Aussie manufacturing. This is the full throttle rise and fall of Holden. Let's rewind to 1856. Holden didn't start with petrol or pistons. It began with saddles. James Alexander Holden opened a saddlery business in South Australia, but as horses turned into horseless carriages, Holden evolved, stitching car seats instead of saddles, and eventually moving into full-blown coach building. Then along came General Motors, the big cheese from Detroit. In 1931, GM bought Holden, merging their operations and forming General Motors Holdens Limited. A mouthful, sure, but a legend was born. After World War II, Aussies were desperate for their own car, something local, something tough. Enter the FX Holden in 1948, Australia's first mass-produced car. It was simple, rugged, and could survive outback hell. Instant icon. The 1950s to the 1970s were Holden's golden years. Cars like the FJ, EH, and the HK Kingswood weren't just transport, they were family members. But then came the Monaro. In 1968, the Monaro screamed onto the scene with a two-door muscle body and V8 grunt. Suddenly, Holden wasn't just building Aussie cars, it was building dreams. And if you were really lucky, you got your hands on the GTS 327, Bathurst-bred, street-ready thunder. At the same time, Ford was sharpening its claws with the Falcon GT. What followed was the V8 war of the 1970s. Holden versus Ford, Monaro versus Falcon. Bathurst was the battlefield, and every Aussie kid chose a side. This wasn't just a rivalry, it was a national identity. And Holden was winning hearts. You can't talk Holden without mentioning Bathurst. Peter Brock, the king of the mountain. 9-time Bathurst winner. Most of them behind the wheel of a snarling Holden. The Tirana and later the Commodore SS didn't just win races, they became symbols of working class pride. Holden wasn't just in the showroom, it was on the podium. And that mattered. In a country where V8s were religion and the Mount Panorama was sacred ground, Holden was the messiah on wheels. In 1978, Holden unleashed its ace, the Commodore. Built from a German Opel shell but Aussie toughened, the VB Commodore was Holden's response to rising fuel costs, foreign competition, and changing buyer tastes. It worked. The Commodore became Holden's backbone. Family car, cop car, burnout car, company car, all in one. Through the 80s and 90s, the Commodore evolved. VL Turbo with the Nissan RB30, cult icon, VN SS, thumping V8 muscle, VT and VE, built tough and world-class. The Commodore wasn't just a car, it was a cultural staple, but dark clouds were brewing. In the 2000s, Australia's car market shifted. People wanted SUVs, not sedans. Imported cars were cheaper, flashier, and better equipped. And the Aussie dollar? Getting stronger. Bad news for local manufacturing. Holden was still building great cars. The VE Commodore in 2006 was a global-level platform. But they were fighting a war with one hand tied behind their back. Then came politics. Under both Liberal and Labor governments, the auto industry was subsidised. A lifeline to keep factories open, workers employed, and Australia building cars. But in 2013, newly elected Prime Minister Tony Abbott cut that cord. His message to Holden? If you want to leave, then leave. Guess what? They did. Tony Abbott's coalition government believed in a free market. No more subsidies. No more propping up manufacturers. Problem was, other countries did prop up their industries. Japan, Germany, the US, all heavily subsidised. Australia went solo. The result? A manufacturing bloodbath. Toyota left. Ford left. And in 2017, Holden shut down its Elizabeth plant in South Australia. Thousands of jobs lost. Generations of car builders out the door. The last Commodore rolled off the line as workers cried and crowds gathered. A eulogy in real time. It wasn't just a business decision, it was a political one. And it cost Australia its automotive soul. Post 2017, Holden didn't die immediately. Instead, it limped on like a zombie, selling rebadged Opels and Chevrolets under the Holden badge. But without Australian-made DNA, the public turned away, sales plummeted, trust evaporated, no V8s, no racing heroes. In 2020, General Motors pulled the plug entirely. Holden was axed, gone, dead. Not just from factories, but from the history books. GM blamed poor sales, but really, they abandoned Holden the second it stopped printing money. Holden wasn't the only casualty. Ford shut its Broadmeadows plant. Toyota closed its Altona factory. Mitsubishi and Nissan had already gone. Australia, once a car-making nation, now builds nothing. All gone. Not because we couldn't, but because politicians and corporations decided it wasn't worth it. From roaring V8s to quiet imports, we went from builders to buyers, from making dreams to leasing SUVs. A whole industry killed off by politics, economics, and globalization. But here's the twist. Holden didn't die in our hearts. The classics are hotter than ever. HK Monaros, Tiranas, VL Turbos, all skyrocketing in value. Commodores? Still doing burnouts at summer nats, still tearing down quarter miles, still loved. You can't kill a spirit that big. Peter Brock's legacy lives on. Mount Panorama still echoes with V8 thunder. Holden Club meets are packed. Swap meets are full of Holden memorabilia, stories, and pride. This wasn't just about cars. It was about Australian identity. Before SUVs turned the Aussie car market beige, before China undercut Japan, and long before Holden's factories went cold, there was a final line of defence. 3 letters that still make grown men misty-eyed. HSV Holden. Special Vehicles wasn't just a performance division, it was Holden's soul, supercharged. And in its prime, it wasn't just building cars, it was keeping the entire Holden brand alive. HSV was born in the ashes of the Peter Brock era HDT, the fearless, rebellious tuner that gave Aussies their first taste of real, raw V8 race-bred machinery on the street. When the Brock-Holden relationship imploded, many thought the dream was over. But HSV, formed through a joint venture between Holden and Tom Walkinshaw Racing, took the DNA of HDT and turned it into a factory-approved juggernaut. By the 1990s and 2000s, HSV was more than just a badge. It was a business strategy. Commodores were reliable, yes, but HSV made them desirable. From Maloo Utes with more power than sense to the Club Sport R8 and the monstrous GTS RW1, HSV gave Aussies something global brands couldn't. Homegrown thunder, loud, rear-wheel drive, unapologetic. And it sold. Across all demographics. Tradies, suburban dads, corporate execs, even retirees looking to relive their youth, HSV was aspirational. It gave the everyday buyer a reason to walk into a Holden showroom and dream bigger. But behind the curtain, Holden's corporate arm knew the truth. HSV wasn't just a sideshow, it was crucial. That's where supercars came in. Holden's dominance in the V8 Supercars Championship wasn't accidental, it was strategic. Backed by HSV Engineering, Walkinshaw Racing, and factory-level investment, the Commodore became the most feared car on the grid. And every time it took a checkered flag, another buyer walked into a dealership with racing glory in their eyes. Much of that success also belonged to Shane Howard, the longtime CFO and now CEO of Supercars. A motorsport veteran with unmatched operational knowledge, Howard helped shape Supercars into the premium, television-ready, sponsor magnet series it became in the 2000s and 2010s. His financial discipline and commercial instincts helped elevate the series into one of the most watched sports in the country and kept Holden's relevance burning strong through every battle with the E-Blue Oval. Under Howard's watch, Supercars didn't just host races, it created events. Bathurst, Adelaide, Townsville. The Supercars calendar became part of the national culture, and Holden's place in it? Legendary. Still, the message was clear. HSV and Supercars weren't just partners, they were co-pilots in keeping Aussie car culture alive. Without HSV, without Supercars, and without the commercial leadership of figures like Shane Howard, Holden may have disappeared from the grid and from hearts far earlier. Instead, it left its mark the way any true Aussie hero should, in a V8, sideways, screaming past the mountain with a nation on its feet. So what's left? We've got Mustangs, we've got Chinese Utes, We've got SUVs with more screens than sense, but there's a gap, a soul-shaped hole in the Australian car market. There's talk of electric utes. There's hope that maybe one day someone brings back manufacturing. But for now, we reminisce. Holden taught us pride. It taught us engineering. It taught us how to build. And it gave us something no spreadsheet can measure: heart. We reminisce and wonder, and often look on car sales to what we could afford from the past. Let's agree cars from yesterday are better than today. The life, the style, the soul. Like and subscribe for more content. We appreciated you allowing us to grow.